The morning sun painted the Afghan mountains in shades of gold and orange, as Team Bravo prepared for what they believed would be their final mission in the region. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez checked his gear one last time, running his fingers along the familiar weight of his M4 carbine. After 18 months of relentless operations in this godforsaken corner of Helmand Province, his team had earned their ticket home. "Rodriguez, you ready for some good old American barbecue?" called out Petty Officer First Class Jake Thompson, adjusting the straps on his heavy pack. The team's explosives expert had been counting down the days until their rotation ended, talking endlessly about his wife's cooking and his daughter's upcoming soccer season. "Man, I'm ready for anything that doesn't involve dodging bullets and eating MREs," Rodriguez replied, forcing a smile. Despite his casual tone, something felt different about today. The intelligence briefing had been unusually sparse, and their commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, had seemed tense during the morning brief. The mission was supposed to be straightforward. A small Taliban cell had been spotted moving weapons through a narrow valley, 15 kilometers northeast of their forward operating base. Air support had confirmed minimal resistance, and local intelligence suggested the insurgents were poorly equipped. For a team that had successfully completed over 40 high-risk operations, this felt like a routine cleanup job. Corpsman Second Class David Kim finished loading medical supplies into his pack, his movements quick and efficient. The team medic had seen more than his share of combat wounds during their deployment, but lately the action had been quieting down. The Taliban fighters in this area had been steadily retreating deeper into the mountains, avoiding direct confrontation with American forces. 36 hours until we're on that bird home," muttered Petty Officer Second Class Antonio Silva, the team's communications specialist. He was the youngest member of the squad at 22, but his technical skills had saved their lives more times than anyone could count. Silva had intercepted enemy radio chatter that helped them avoid 3 separate ambushes in the past month alone. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell approached the team, her expression serious but confident. A veteran of 3 combat deployments, she had led Team Bravo through some of the most dangerous operations in the region. Her tactical decisions had earned the respect of every man under her command, and her ability to read the battlefield had kept them all alive. "Listen up, gentlemen," Mitchell began, her voice cutting through the morning chatter. "We've got solid intel on a weapons cache moving through grid reference 41S MD 112345-67890. The convoy consists of 3 vehicles, approximately 8 to 12 personnel. Our job is to intercept, secure any intelligence, and neutralize the threat." The team gathered around a detailed topographical map spread across the hood of their armored vehicle. Mitchell traced their route with her finger, highlighting key terrain features and potential escape routes the enemy might use. The valley they were heading into was narrow, with steep ridges on both sides providing excellent cover for their approach. "Air support will be on station in 4 hours, she continued. "We move in fast, hit them hard, and extract before they know what happened." Questions? Rodriguez studied the map carefully, noting the elevation changes and natural choke points. Something about the terrain bothered him, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what. The ridgelines offered excellent overwatch positions, but intelligence had confirmed the area was clear of enemy forces. "What about civilian populations?" asked Kim, always concerned about collateral damage. The medic had seen too many innocent people caught in the crossfire of military operations. "Nearest village is 8 kilometers south," Mitchell replied. "The area should be completely clear of non-combatants." Thompson checked his explosive charges one final time, ensuring each device was properly armed and ready for deployment. His job would be to destroy any weapons or equipment they couldn't carry back to base, leaving nothing useful for other insurgent groups. As the team loaded into their mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle, the mood was cautiously optimistic. They had performed this type of operation dozens of times, and their success rate was nearly perfect. The vehicle's thick armor and advanced detection systems had protected them from countless roadside bombs and small arms attacks. Silva tested his radio equipment, establishing contact with their forward operating base, and confirming communication protocols with air support. The familiar crackle of radio chatter filled the vehicle as they began their journey into the mountains. Everything seemed routine, professional, and under control. The landscape outside their vehicle was breathtakingly beautiful despite the constant threat of danger. Rugged peaks stretched toward a crystal-clear sky, and ancient stone walls marked boundaries that had existed for centuries. It was hard to believe that such natural beauty could hide so much violence and death. "You know what I'm going to miss most about this place?" Thompson said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Absolutely nothing." His comment drew chuckles from the rest of the team, but Rodriguez noticed that Mitchell remained focused on her tactical display, continuously monitoring their route and surrounding terrain. As they approached the target area, each team member fell into the familiar rhythm of pre-combat preparation. Weapons were checked, ammunition counted, and communication protocols reviewed. They had performed these rituals so many times that every movement was automatic. Every procedure burned into muscle memory. The vehicle slowed as they reached their insertion point, a rocky outcrop that provided concealment while allowing them to observe the valley below. Through their advanced optics, they could see the target vehicles moving slowly along the dirt road, exactly where intelligence had predicted they would be. "All right, people," Mitchell said quietly, her voice steady and professional. "This is it. Let's make it clean, fast, and get home safely." None of them could have imagined that within the next few hours, their routine mission would become a desperate fight for survival against an enemy they never saw coming. Team Bravo moved like shadows down the rocky slope, their years of training evident in every calculated step. Rodriguez took point, his eyes constantly scanning for threats while his team followed in perfect formation behind him. The weight of their equipment felt familiar and reassuring as they descended toward the valley floor. The Taliban convoy had stopped exactly where intelligence predicted. 3 battered pickup trucks clustered around what appeared to be a mechanical breakdown. Through his scope, Rodriguez counted 9 men, some working on the disabled vehicle while others stood guard with AK-47 rifles. Everything looked exactly as briefed, but his instincts kept nagging at him. Mitchell's voice crackled softly through their headsets. "Bravo 2, what's your assessment?" She had positioned herself on higher ground with Silva, maintaining overwatch while the assault team moved into position. "Targets confirmed. 9 military-age males, weapons visible," Rodriguez whispered back. "Thompson, Kim, move to flanking position Alpha. I'll take the direct approach once you're in position." The plan was textbook perfect. Thompson and Kim would circle around to cut off any escape route while Rodriguez engaged from the front. Silva would provide communication support, while Mitchell coordinated the entire operation from her elevated position. They had executed similar missions countless times with 0 casualties. Thompson and Kim moved with practiced stealth through the sparse vegetation, using every available piece of cover to mask their approach. The explosives expert carried enough firepower to level a small building, while Kim's medical training made him invaluable in any combat situation. Both men had saved Rodriguez's life on previous missions, creating an unbreakable bond of trust between them. As they maneuvered into position, Rodriguez noticed something that made his blood run cold. One of the Taliban fighters was speaking into a radio, but his body language suggested he wasn't calling for help with the broken vehicle. The man's posture was too alert, too focused, like someone receiving important information rather than requesting assistance. "Boss, something doesn't feel right," Rodriguez transmitted quietly. "Guy with the radio looks like he's getting orders, not reporting a breakdown." Mitchell adjusted her scope, studying the scene below with increased attention. Her years of combat experience had taught her to trust her team's instincts, especially Rodriguez's. The staff sergeant had an uncanny ability to sense trouble before it became visible. "Hold position," she ordered. "Let me get a better read on this situation." Through her high-powered optics, Mitchell observed the radio operator more carefully. The man's movements were too coordinated, too purposeful for someone dealing with a simple mechanical problem. Moreover, the other fighters seemed to be positioning themselves strategically around the vehicles rather than focusing on repairs. Silva's voice cut through the tension. "Boss, I'm picking up increased radio chatter on Taliban frequencies. Sounds like there are more players in this game than we thought." Before Mitchell could respond, the radio operator below suddenly pointed directly at their position on the ridge. The man hadn't spotted them, but he was clearly communicating coordinates to someone else. The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place with terrifying clarity. "This is a setup," Mitchell realized, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "All units prepare for immediate extraction. were compromised, but it was already too late. The first shot came from somewhere high on the opposite ridge, a supersonic crack that split the morning air like thunder. The bullet struck the ground inches from Rodriguez's position, sending chunks of rock flying in all directions. "Sniper," Rodriguez shouted, diving for cover behind a large boulder. High and right, approximately 800 meters. The Taliban fighters below immediately scrambled for defensive positions, confirming Mitchell's worst fears. This wasn't a weapons transport operation. It was an elaborate ambush designed specifically to lure American forces into a kill zone. Thompson and Kim found themselves caught in the open as more shots began raining down from the ridge. The sniper's position offered a commanding view of the entire valley, and his accuracy was immediately apparent. Each shot was precisely placed, forcing the SEAL team to seek whatever minimal cover was available. "Kim, get to that rock formation on your left," Thompson yelled, providing covering fire with his M4. The corpsman sprinted across 15 meters of open ground as bullets chewed up the earth around his feet. Silva worked frantically with his radio equipment, trying to establish contact with air support, while Mitchell coordinated their defensive response. The communications specialist knew that without immediate backup, their chances of survival were dropping by the minute. "Air support is 20 minutes out," Silva reported, his voice strained with effort as he hugged the ground. "Base wants to know if we can hold position." "Negative," Mitchell responded immediately. "We need immediate extraction. This sniper has us pinned down, and we've got unknown numbers of hostiles in elevated positions." The sniper's next shot nearly took Thompson's head off, the bullet passing so close he could feel the heat of its passage. The explosives expert realized with growing horror that they were dealing with a highly skilled marksman, possibly someone with formal military training. Rodriguez tried to identify the sniper's exact position, but the shooter was well concealed among the rocks and sparse vegetation of the opposite ridge. Each time Rodriguez thought he had spotted the muzzle flash, the sniper would shift to a slightly different location. "Boss, this guy knows what he's doing," Rodriguez reported. "He's got us bracketed from multiple firing positions. We need to move now before he gets lucky." The Taliban fighters in the valley had also opened fire, using their vehicles as cover while they engaged the pinned-down SEAL team. Their weapons were older and less accurate, but the volume of fire was forcing Team Bravo to keep their heads down. Mitchell realized they were facing a tactical nightmare. The sniper held the high ground with clear fields of fire, while the fighters below prevented any movement toward better cover. They were trapped in a killing zone with limited ammunition and no immediate support. "All units, listen carefully," she transmitted. "We're going to bound by teams toward the extraction point. Rodriguez, you and Kim move first. Thompson and Silva will provide covering fire." But as Rodriguez prepared to make his move, another shot cracked overhead. This one even closer than before. The sniper was systematically zeroing in on their positions, and it was only a matter of time before one of those bullets found its mark. The morning that had started with thoughts of home and safety had transformed into a desperate fight for survival against an enemy who had been waiting for them all along. The crack of the sniper's rifle had become a constant threat, each shot more accurate than the last. Rodriguez pressed himself against the boulder, feeling the rough stone dig into his back as another bullet chipped away at the rock inches from his face. Dust and debris filled the air, making it difficult to see clearly. "Kim, you still breathing over there?" Rodriguez called out to his teammate, who had managed to reach a small depression in the ground about 20 meters away. "Yeah, but barely," Kim responded, his voice tight with adrenaline. "This guy's getting closer with every shot. I can't even lift my head without nearly getting it blown off." Mitchell studied their tactical situation with growing concern. The sniper had them completely pinned down, while the Taliban fighters in the valley were beginning to advance on their position. She needed to make a decision quickly before their situation became completely hopeless. "Silva, what's the status on that air support?" she demanded, keeping her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "Still 15 minutes out, boss," Silva replied, his face pressed against the ground as he worked his radio. "But I've got something else. I'm intercepting communications that suggest there are at least 3 more hostile positions on surrounding ridges." The news hit Mitchell like a physical blow. They weren't just facing a single sniper. They were in the middle of a coordinated ambush involving multiple shooters positioned on the high ground around them. The Taliban had used their convoy as bait to draw American forces into a carefully prepared killing zone. Thompson tried to get a better angle on the Taliban fighters below, but every time he exposed himself, the sniper's bullet would force him back into cover. The explosives expert was carrying enough firepower to change the tactical situation, but he couldn't use it if he couldn't move. "I need covering fire," Thompson called out. "If I can get to that ridgeline 30 meters to our south, I can set charges that will give us some breathing room." "Negative," Mitchell responded immediately. "That sniper will cut you down before you make it halfway." Rodriguez was thinking frantically, trying to find a solution to their impossible situation. His years of combat experience told him that staying pinned down would only make their situation worse. They needed to take action, even if it meant accepting significant risk. Another shot rang out, this one striking so close to Kim that the corpsman actually felt the bullet pass through the air next to his ear. The sniper was systematically working his way through their positions, and it was clear he knew exactly where each team member was hiding. "Boss, we're running out of time," Rodriguez transmitted urgently. "This guy's going to start picking us off one by one if we don't do something." Mitchell knew Rodriguez was right, but every tactical option seemed to lead to certain death for at least one of her team members. The sniper's position offered him perfect overwatch of the entire area, while their own cover was minimal and decreasing with each accurate shot. Silva suddenly looked up from his radio with a mixture of hope and concern. "I've got contact with a Marine patrol about 6 kilometers south of here. They heard the gunfire and are moving to assist, but they're at least 30 minutes away." "That's too long," Mitchell replied grimly. "We'll be dead or captured long before they get here." The Taliban fighters in the valley had begun a coordinated advance, using their vehicles as mobile cover while they moved closer to the SEAL team's position. Their tactics were surprisingly sophisticated, suggesting they had received training from experienced military personnel. Kim spotted movement through a gap in the rocks and realized with growing alarm that some of the Taliban fighters were attempting to flank their position. If the insurgents succeeded in getting behind them, the team would be caught in a crossfire with no escape route. "Hostiles moving to our 6 o'clock, Kim reported, adjusting his rifle to cover the new threat. "Looks like 4 or 5 fighters trying to get around behind us." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Team Bravo was facing enemies on multiple fronts with superior numbers and better positioning. Their ammunition was limited, air support was still minutes away, and the sniper continued to dominate the battlefield with deadly precision. Rodriguez made a decision that went against every rule of engagement he had ever learned. Instead of waiting for the perfect tactical moment, he decided to create chaos that might give his team a chance to survive. "Thompson, when I give the signal, put everything you've got into those vehicles down there," Rodriguez ordered. "I'm going to draw the sniper's fire while you work." "Rodriguez, that's suicide," Mitchell protested. "The second you move, he'll kill you." "Maybe," Rodriguez replied, checking his ammunition one final time. "But if we don't try something, we're all dead anyway." The staff sergeant took several deep breaths, preparing himself mentally for what might be his final action. He thought briefly about his wife and 2 children back home, wondering if he would ever see them again. But his team was depending on him, and he refused to let them down. "Kim, Silva, be ready to move the instant Thompson's charges go off," Rodriguez instructed. "We're going to have maybe 10 seconds of confusion to change our position." Mitchell realized she couldn't stop Rodriguez from making his desperate attempt. Her job as team leader was to support her men and give them the best chance of survival, even when their plan seemed hopeless. "All right, people," she said quietly. "When Rodriguez moves, everyone follows the plan. We stick together, we cover each other, and we all go home." Rodriguez counted down from 3, then launched himself across the open ground toward better cover. The sniper's shot came immediately, the bullet passing so close to Rodriguez's head that he could feel the shockwave. But the staff sergeant kept moving, zigzagging unpredictably as more shots cracked around him. Thompson used the distraction to expose himself long enough to fire 3 explosive rounds at the Taliban vehicles. The grenades detonated in rapid succession, sending metal fragments and burning fuel high into the air. The massive explosions echoed through the valley like thunder. For a brief moment, the overwhelming sound and smoke created exactly the confusion Rodriguez had hoped for. But as the team prepared to move, they realized their ordeal was far from over. The explosion from Thompson's grenades created a temporary wall of smoke and debris that concealed Team Bravo's movement. but Rodriguez knew their advantage would last only seconds. As he dove behind a new piece of cover, he felt something warm spreading across his left shoulder. The sniper's last shot had been closer than he realized. "Rodriguez is hit," Kim shouted, spotting the blood seeping through his teammate's uniform. The corpsman immediately began moving toward the wounded staff sergeant, his medical training overriding every survival instinct. "Kim, stay down," Mitchell ordered sharply. The sniper's still active, but it was too late. As Kim exposed himself to reach Rodriguez, another shot rang out from the ridge. The bullet struck the corpsman in the upper thigh, sending him sprawling across the rocky ground with a grunt of pain and surprise. Now Team Bravo had 2 wounded members pinned down in the open, while the Taliban fighters who had survived Thompson's explosive attack were regrouping for another assault. The smoke was beginning to clear, and their temporary concealment was rapidly disappearing. Silva worked frantically with his radio, trying to coordinate with the incoming air support while keeping track of multiple enemy positions. The communications specialist could hear helicopter rotors in the distance, but the aircraft were still several minutes away from being able to provide effective assistance. "Air support is requesting target coordinates," Silva reported, his voice strained as he pressed himself against the ground. "But they can't engage until they can identify friendly positions." Mitchell realized they were caught in an impossible situation. The sniper continued to dominate the high ground, preventing any movement while the surviving Taliban fighters were preparing for a coordinated assault on their weakened position. Air support couldn't engage without risking friendly fire, and ground reinforcements were still too far away to help. Thompson crawled toward Kim's position, staying as low as possible while the sniper searched for new targets. The explosives expert had used most of his grenades in the initial attack, but he still carried enough firepower to make a difference if he could get close enough to the enemy positions. "Kim, how bad is it?" Thompson asked as he reached the wounded corpsman. "Bullet went through the muscle, missed the bone," Kim replied through gritted teeth. "I can still fight, but I'm not going to be doing any running." Rodriguez was in similar condition, his shoulder wound bleeding steadily but not immediately life-threatening. The staff sergeant was more concerned about their tactical situation than his own injury. They needed to find a way to neutralize the sniper or their entire team would be wiped out. "Boss, I've got an idea," Rodriguez transmitted to Mitchell. "That sniper's been firing from the same general area for the past 10 minutes. If we can get him to expose his position, air support might be able to take him out." "What are you thinking?" Mitchell responded, though she already suspected she wasn't going to like Rodriguez's plan. "I'm thinking someone needs to give him a target he can't resist," Rodriguez replied grimly. "Someone needs to make a run for that extraction point and draw his fire long enough for the helicopters to spot his muzzle flash." Mitchell understood immediately what Rodriguez was proposing, and the idea filled her with dread. The staff sergeant was suggesting that one of them deliberately expose themselves to sniper fire in order to reveal the shooter's position. It was essentially a suicide mission with only a slim chance of success. "Absolutely not," Mitchell said firmly. "We're not sacrificing anyone on a plan with those odds." But even as she spoke, Mitchell knew they were running out of alternatives. The Taliban fighters in the valley had recovered from Thompson's explosive attack and were beginning another advance. Several of them had flanked around to cut off potential escape routes, while others provided covering fire from behind the burning vehicles. Silva suddenly looked up from his radio with an expression of mixed hope and concern. "Boss, air support is 2 minutes out, but they're reporting additional hostile movement throughout the area. Looks like we might have stumbled into something much bigger than a simple weapons transport." The news confirmed Mitchell's worst fears. They hadn't just been ambushed by a single Taliban cell. They had walked into a major enemy operation involving multiple groups positioned throughout the valley system. The sniper was just one piece of a much larger tactical puzzle. Kim struggled to apply a field dressing to his wounded leg while maintaining his defensive position. Despite his injury, the corpsman continued to monitor the approaching Taliban fighters, his rifle ready to engage any threat that came within range. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Kim reported, spotting 3 fighters attempting to use a dry creek bed to approach their position undetected. Range approximately 150 meters in closing. Thompson shifted his position to engage the new threat, but the moment he exposed himself, the sniper's bullet cracked overhead. The shot was so close that Thompson could feel the heat of the bullet's passage, and he immediately understood that the enemy marksman was still very much in control of the battlefield. Rodriguez was bleeding more heavily now, but his mind remained focused on finding a solution to their tactical problem. The staff sergeant had survived too many combat situations to give up hope, even when the odds seemed impossible. "Silva, can you patch me through to air support?" Rodriguez asked. "I want to talk to them directly." "Rodriguez, what are you planning?" Mitchell demanded, recognizing the tone in her subordinate's voice. "I'm planning to get us all home alive," Rodriguez replied simply, "but I need to coordinate directly with those helicopters." As Silva established the communication link, the sound of rotor blades grew steadily louder. Help was finally approaching, but Team Bravo still needed to survive the next few critical minutes. The sniper remained hidden on his ridge. The Taliban fighters continued their advance, and the wounded SEALs were running low on ammunition. Mitchell watched her team with a mixture of pride and desperation. These men had followed her through countless dangerous missions, and she was determined not to lose any of them during what was supposed to be their final operation. But as another sniper shot cracked overhead, she realized that determination alone might not be enough to save them. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder, but Rodriguez knew that air support alone wouldn't save them, unless they could identify the sniper's exact position. The enemy marksman had been firing from multiple locations along the ridge, making it nearly impossible for the aircraft to target him effectively. "Viper 6, this is Bravo 1. Rodriguez spoke directly into Silva's radio, his voice steady despite the pain in his shoulder. "I need you to understand our situation down here." "Bravo 1, this is Viper 6, came the pilot's response. "We see your position and multiple hostiles in the valley. What do you need?" Rodriguez took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would determine whether his team lived or died. "Viper 6, we have a sniper on the eastern ridge who's been keeping us pinned down. He's mobile, firing from different positions, and we can't get a fix on him." "Copy that, Bravo 1. We're scanning with thermal, but there's too much cover up there. We need you to help us identify his position." Mitchell understood immediately what Rodriguez was planning, and she felt her heart sink. The staff sergeant was going to use himself as bait to draw the sniper's fire, hoping the helicopters could spot the muzzle flash in time to eliminate the threat. "Rodriguez, don't even think about it," Mitchell ordered. "We'll find another way." But Rodriguez was already moving, ignoring his commander's direct order. The staff sergeant understood that sometimes leadership meant making the hard decisions that others couldn't make. He crawled toward a position that would give him a clear run toward better cover, knowing the sniper would have to expose himself to take the shot. Thompson saw what Rodriguez was planning and immediately prepared to provide covering fire. The explosives expert positioned himself to engage any Taliban fighters who might try to take advantage of the distraction. "Kim, you ready to move when this goes down?" Thompson asked the wounded corpsman. "As ready as I'll ever be," Kim replied, checking his weapon one final time. Despite his injured leg, the medic was determined to do his part in whatever desperate plan Rodriguez was executing. Silva maintained his radio contact with the helicopters while keeping one eye on the advancing Taliban fighters. The communications specialist could see that several insurgents had worked their way to within 50 meters of their position, using the terrain to mask their approach. "Viper 6, stand by," Rodriguez transmitted. "I'm going to give you a target in 5 seconds." Mitchell watched in horror as Rodriguez prepared to sacrifice himself for the team. The lieutenant commander had lost men in combat before, but never because of a direct order she could have prevented. Her finger hovered over her radio transmit button, ready to abort the mission. Rodriguez suddenly burst from cover, sprinting across 20 meters of open ground toward a rock formation that would provide better protection. The sniper's shot came immediately, the bullet passing so close to Rodriguez's head that it actually grazed his helmet. "Muzzle flash, eastern ridge, 2 o'clock from your position," Silva shouted into the radio, having spotted the brief flame from the sniper's weapon. The helicopter's response was immediate and devastating. A stream of 30mm cannon fire erupted from the aircraft, walking across the ridge where the sniper had revealed himself. The explosive rounds shattered rock and sent debris flying in all directions, but Rodriguez's desperate gambit had cost him dearly. As he dove for cover, a second shot from somewhere else on the ridge caught him in the back, sending him tumbling across the rocky ground. The staff sergeant lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his still form. "Rodriguez is down," Kim yelled, immediately beginning to crawl toward his fallen teammate despite his own wound. Mitchell felt rage and desperation coursing through her as she watched her best soldier lying wounded in the open. The lieutenant commander made a decision that went against every tactical principle she had ever learned. "All units covering fire now," Mitchell ordered, then broke from her own cover to reach Rodriguez. Thompson and Silva opened up with everything they had, their combined fire forcing the Taliban fighters to seek cover. The explosives expert used his last grenade to destroy a position where several insurgents had been preparing to advance. The helicopters continued their attack on the ridge, systematically destroying every possible sniper position with devastating cannon fire. Rock and dust filled the air as the aircraft methodically eliminated the threat that had pinned down Team Bravo. Mitchell reached Rodriguez just as Kim arrived at the scene. The staff sergeant was unconscious but still breathing, blood flowing from wounds in his shoulder and back. The lieutenant commander felt for a pulse and found it weak but steady. "How bad?" Mitchell asked Kim as the corpsman began his medical assessment. "Bad, but not fatal if we get him out of here quickly," Kim replied, working rapidly to stop the bleeding. "The back wound missed his spine, but he's lost a lot of blood." Silva continued coordinating with air support, while Thompson established a defensive perimeter around the wounded men. The Taliban fighters in the valley had been scattered by the helicopter attack, but the communications specialist was picking up radio chatter suggesting that reinforcements were heading toward their position. "Boss, we need to move now," Silva reported urgently. "I'm hearing multiple units converging on our location. We've got maybe 10 minutes before this place is crawling with hostiles." The helicopters had cleared a landing zone about 200 meters from their position, but getting there would require carrying Rodriguez across difficult terrain, while potentially under fire from remaining Taliban fighters. "Thompson, Silva, help me get Rodriguez ready to move," Mitchell ordered.
"Kim, can you walk?"
"I can manage," Kim replied, though his face was pale with pain and blood loss. As they prepared to move their wounded teammate, Mitchell felt a mixture of pride and relief. Against impossible odds, Team Bravo had survived their deadliest mission. The sniper who had seemed invincible was finally silent, and extraction was only minutes away. But Rodriguez remained unconscious, his breathing shallow, and Mitchell knew they weren't safe yet. The most dangerous part of their ordeal was still ahead, as they attempted to reach the landing zone with their wounded. The journey to the extraction point felt like the longest 200 meters of Mitchell's military career. Thompson and Silva carried Rodriguez between them, the unconscious staff sergeant's blood leaving a trail across the rocky ground. Kim limped behind them, his rifle ready despite his wounded leg, while Mitchell provided overwatch from their rear. The helicopters circled overhead like protective eagles, their cannon fire systematically destroying any remaining Taliban positions. But Silva's radio intercepts had confirmed their worst fears. Multiple enemy units were converging on their location, and time was running out quickly. 30 meters to the landing zone, Mitchell reported, watching the helicopter settle into position ahead of them. The aircraft's rotor wash kicked up clouds of dust and debris, making it difficult to see potential threats in the surrounding terrain. Rodriguez stirred briefly as they carried him, his eyes opening for just a moment before consciousness slipped away again. Kim checked his pulse and found it stronger than before, giving him hope that the staff sergeant would survive his wounds. "Keep him stable," Kim shouted over the noise of the helicopter engines. "We're almost there." But as they approached the landing zone, Silva spotted movement in the rocks to their left. 3 Taliban fighters had somehow survived the air attack and were positioning themselves to ambush the extraction. The communications specialist immediately opened fire, his bullets sparking off the stones where the insurgents had taken cover. "Hostiles left side," Silva yelled, continuing to engage the threat while helping to carry Rodriguez. Mitchell spun around and laid down, suppressing fire, her M4 carbine spitting flame as she forced the Taliban fighters to keep their heads down. The lieutenant commander had led her team through hell, and she wasn't about to lose anyone during the final moments of their escape. Thompson struggled to maintain his grip on Rodriguez while returning fire with his sidearm. The explosives expert was exhausted from carrying his wounded teammate, but his determination never wavered. These men had saved his life countless times, and he would do whatever it took to get them home safely. The helicopter crew chief waved them forward frantically, the aircraft's engines spinning at maximum power as the pilot prepared for immediate departure. Medical personnel stood ready to receive the wounded SEALs, their equipment already prepared for emergency treatment. Kim reached the helicopter first despite his injured leg, immediately beginning to coordinate with the flight medic about Rodriguez's condition. The corpsman's medical training allowed him to communicate the staff sergeant's injuries quickly and effectively. Gunshot wounds to the shoulder and back, significant blood loss. Vitals stable but weak, Kim reported as they loaded Rodriguez into the aircraft. Thompson and Silva practically threw themselves into the helicopter as more Taliban fighters appeared on the surrounding ridges. The insurgents had realized this was their last chance to inflict casualties on the American forces, and they were taking desperate risks to get within range. Mitchell was the last to board, continuing to provide covering fire as the helicopter lifted off. Bullets sparked off the aircraft's armored hull, but the pilot maintained steady control as they climbed away from the valley of death. As the mountains fell away beneath them, Mitchell finally,